As the first raindrops hit the windshield, Michael turned on the wipers. A day, he thought. Not only are they having him work this late, but that crazy woman too. It's certainly enough to give anyone a headache. He leaned back into the seat, trying to ignore the pain pulsing in his temples, and focus on the road. He hated driving through the stretch. It was a poorly lit forested area, and though he knew how unlikely it was, he always expected an animal to jump out in front of his car. He took a wide swing left and reduced his speed, preparing for the familiar intersection, but just as he turned the wheel, his lights shone upon a car on the side of the road. Normally, he wouldn't pay much attention so long as he wasn't gonna hit anything, but this pickup truck had its hazard warning lights on. Perhaps a breakdown? He sighed, wishing he could just continue driving, but be it how he was raised or maybe just his character, something inside compelled him to stop and help. Getting out of the car, he squinted against its bright lights, which made his headache flare up.
Hello?
He said, walking towards it.
I saw your car here and...
He never finished that sentence. The car was empty. All doors were open, but nobody around. Huh, that's strange. He looked around. The forest was pitch black and silent. No footsteps, voices, nothing. He peeked into the car. There was a half-filled bottle of water, some clothes strewn about on the back seat, and a pile of papers under the dashboard. He knew he really shouldn't. This was most definitely a bad idea. But again, something compelled him to do so. And maybe it was the ever-increasing pounding headache clouding his judgment. He grabbed one of the papers and turned it around. It was a drawing depicting a tall figure dressed in dark clothes in a forest. This, man had a series of dark lines sprouting from his back, almost like tentacles. Most curiously though, the face portion of the drawing was left completely blank and unfinished. For some reason, Michael felt a chill down his spine. He grabbed another paper, but the drawing was more or less the same. Then another. Then another. Ah, dang, the pounding in his head. He couldn't take it anymore. He had to get out of there. Running back to his car, he realized the engine was off. How can that be? He was sure he left it on. He turned the key. Nothing. Again. Nothing. All the while, one of the trees behind his car started to move. The creature this gentleman was about to encounter goes by many names, including the Pale One, the White King, or Der Schla. Man, but it is most commonly known as Slender Man, and as it so happens, it will be the main topic of today's video. I'll be telling you all the information we have on it, including origins, appearance, behavior, and creation, some drawing supplies, charge your flashlight, and let's go. Now, starting out with the history of Slender Man can be quite difficult since none of it is specifically confirmed. However, very early depictions of similar creatures, which often took on the role of a knight or a noble figure, can be traced back to the early 1600s in Germany as myths and cautionary tales for children. Naturally, as technology progressed from the start of the 1900s, we had more accounts of sightings and even photographed evidence from all around the UK, Russia, and United States, usually linked to child disappearances, though notably, there were also accounts of it appearing to soldiers in war zones of Germany during First and Second World Wars. As we near closer to present day, more and more accounts of this creature appearing have been captured on cameras and video, with the most famous perhaps being the Marble Hornets YouTube series, which also introduced its signature symbol. From all this historic exposure, we have been able to gather some characteristics of the Slenderman, as well as some of its typical behavior. Back in the day, most victims would either be children or adults who have at some point in their life gone through a terrible tragedy. For children, it would approach in a friendly manner, trying to gain their trust. For adults, it would usually stalk the victim for long periods of time, which would eventually lead to something called slender sickness, with symptoms that include paranoia, nightmares, hallucinations, and nosebleeds. Once the victim had completely lost their mind, they would usually be abducted and brought to a nearby forest, where they would die after being impaled onto a tree branch. In some exceptional cases, the victim's organs would be removed as well, together with their house being burned down, which often resulted in more deaths. Interestingly enough, it seems that over time, Slenderman's approach as well as set of abilities has somewhat evolved into the state we know today, where the creature prefers to take a much more passive approach, preferring to stalk the prey for any period of time, ranging from minutes to decades, causing a more severe variation of its sickness, enriched by nightmares, coughing, difficulty swallowing, vomiting, and or convulsing before it vanishes away with you, leaving no trace behind. It should be noted here that many times the victim isn't aware of their ailment at first, which can cause others to get targeted. What exactly happens to these people after kidnapping isn't known, as most of them never show up again and video/photography evidence always appears heavily distorted, but it is theorized they might not be killed right away. Curiously, when it comes to children, how Slenderman behaves can be quite different. Over multiple years, it will often try to brainwash them into servitude, sometimes creating what people refer to as proxies, mindless human drones which it then uses to further its unknown goals. It also needs to be said here though, that the abilities this creature possesses are never quite the same from sighting to sighting, and have also changed based on popular media portrayals. When it comes to places the Slenderman can usually be found at, it seems to have a preference for densely forested areas. However, it will also sometimes appear in decrepit buildings, abandoned areas, or using its selective invisibility power, even in broad daylight to the person it's stalking. If that happens, to be you, well first, I'm really sorry. But hey, at least you definitely won't have a hard time recognizing this creature when you see it. Despite often being described as anywhere between 6 to 15 feet in height, on video, it usually appears much closer to the 7-foot mark, sporting a lanky, slender body dressed in a black suit with a tie. Its most recognizable feature is of course its face, or perhaps lack thereof, and additionally, it is often portrayed with several dark tentacles emerging from the back. Though most of the time it will be seen standing still, and only using teleportation to move around, it has demonstrated being capable of walking and even running, if the situation demands it. Now before we wrap up, let's talk about how the actual Slenderman creature we all picture today came to be. First depictions of it were submitted to the Something Awful Internet Forum's Photoshop contest back on June 10th, 2009, where the challenge was to create paranormal looking images by Eric Knudsen under the pseudonym of
No fucking way. Eric Knudsen?
Victor Surge. The post quickly became popular with more members contributing their pictures and ideas, which quickly sprawled into what we know today, with numerous media adaptations like games, movies, short stories, and videos. Interestingly enough,
To be honest, those Slenderman videos are pretty funny.
Eric says he was inspired by the works of H.P. Lovecraft, Stephen King, and Zach Parson when coming up with the original idea. Naturally, there is a ton more to talk about, given the fact that Slenderman is more of a community project rather than the idea of a single person. There is no strictly defined canon, and so over the years, many different claims about its abilities or events it is responsible for
How to survive Slenderman 101. Number 1, kill yourself. There.
were made, and it can be quite hard to distinguish which of these should be taken seriously. So for this video, I mostly focused on things that these depictions seem to agree on. I also can't end this video without mentioning that unfortunately, even some real-life tragedies were actually connected to this creature, such as the horrific stabbing in Waukesha, Wisconsin, so please always employ rational thinking when it comes to stuff like this, because otherwise, it can end really badly.
One of those girls were set free and one of the second was psychiatric ward. I don't know why I'm caught up on that case. One got, I think one got 12 years, the one got life. Oh, that's okay. One girl got stabbed and then like the other two ran off. Was like funny like, whoa, did you get fucking stabbed? And then took her to the hospital and tell her what the fuck happened and she tried to get arrested. People are fucking.
Take an example from Notch, who seemingly liked the idea of this creature so much, he actually went ahead and worked it into this little-known sandbox building game called Minecraft, where it now exists as the infamous Enderman. But with that, we come to the end of this video, so I hope you guys enjoyed and have something new fun to think about